Even before the pandemic touched TNT shores, the government used the public health regulations to keep the public in line, and all 58 versions since have been used under the authority of the Health Minister Terence Deyalsingh. It's why journalists today attempted to get clarification on a situation involving a cabinet minister's son and a party boat transformed into a restaurant on the sea which police raided on Boxing Day. However, he avoided commenting directly on any possible breaches, saying it was a matter for the police and DPP. He then clarified that the letter he received from Adrian Schoon was not a request for permission.
Once you download the poster that you put up, that is all you need to do, and you have agreed to operate as a safe zone. The minister nor the ministry does not give permission.
While this is encompassed in Regulation 8, it does not facilitate a party boat as an acceptable enterprise to operate as a safe zone. Furthermore, Regulation 4 also prohibits operating such a vessel regardless of the reason, unless exempted by the minister. When this point was raised, the health minister said it's up to the police to interpret the law and apply it as they see fit.
The regulations are there for interpretation by the TTPS.
Pressed again for clarity on if a party boat could be used in the manner it was, Deyalsingh said the advice of independent attorneys be sought for anyone uncertain about operating as a safe zone.
I would advise anyone who wants to operate as a safe zone, whether it's a party boat or not, to seek their own independent legal advice. That's the best advice I can give them.
It was only when questioned by CNC3 News about the need for an independent attorney's interpretation when the person who signed the regulation was sitting on the panel that he revealed he was instructed not to go into details.
I think the issue that has been raised is one that needs interpretation, and that is why I said the matter is currently before the DPP. And that is why I have been advised by the lawyers not to say too much, because it is before the DPP.
But the cautious statements now is a stark contrast to his previous position when Samantha Ramachan went viral last September for being on a private beach.
Let us adhere to the spirit of the law and stop looking for technicalities and loopholes to excuse behavior.
CNC3 News reached out to the Attorney General, Faris Al-Rawi, for further clarification on why the interpretation of the law is being questioned. However, he redirected CNC3 News to his previous release on the matter and said it's not one for the Attorney General to be involved in. CNC3 News was also unable to reach the Acting Police Commissioner, McDonald Jacob, for comment. But while charges weren't laid immediately and the case remains before the DPP for advice, it's not unprecedented that this could be done at a later date. In January, over 100 people were held at Residence Nightclub in Woodbrook for breaching the regulations. 85 of them were charged via summons in July and went before the court in August. Rashad Khan, CNC3 News.
So that report came forward last evening via the CNC3 News. Thank you so much, Rashad, for that interesting piece and really giving a perspective, pulling some of the footage from what happened last year, what transpired earlier this year, to put it into context. Let me bring in Martin George into the conversation. It's always a pleasure to touch base with you, Martin. Of course, compliments of the season. Seeing you're in your festive shirt, you're ready for the new year. All the best to you and your family, my friend. Welcome.
Thank you, Jason, and good morning to you, and good morning to all your viewers on CNC3, and of course, early New Year's greetings to the nation of Trinidad and Tobago.
So let me ask you though, when we consider this party boat situation that's been in the news cycle for the last couple of days, can we consider William Shakespeare's masterpiece, Much Ado About Nothing? Is it that case, or is there some level of relevance to what we're experiencing with the pandemic, and there was, or at least from the lower standpoint, a breach, hence the reason they went down with Maxi and officers and pulled the people off the branch?
Well, of course, there's the drama and intrigue surrounding this scenario, Jason, because one of the principal players is the son of a government minister. So, of course, in Trinidad and Tobago, that would always generate, a news cycle. So that's understandable. But the bigger picture is that, look, in the midst of something such as a global pandemic, and in the midst of making rules and regulations and laws to try to manage the situation, there are times when you need need to look at it again and say, well, okay, I need to tweak this, I need to adjust this, I need to adapt this. A classic example, Jason, was the situation with the bars where the government had given a cutoff time and said, look, you must close at midnight. But there was nothing in the regulations which said what time you must open. So, of course, being the creative and inventive people that we are, yes, the bars closed at midnight, and by 10 past midnight, they reopened because there was nothing in. So then the government had to scramble and then now put in legislation to regulate the opening hours also. So this is not unexpected or unprecedented. You see it with countries all over the world where they are adapting their laws. They are you look at New York, they had dropped their mask mandate, they brought it back. Florida has had the same thing. So it's a situation where we must understand that there will be the need from time to time to look at it again and say, hey, we need to plug this loophole, we need to fix this, we need to adjust this, we need to amend this. And ultimately, it becomes the responsibility of the Attorney General and the Parliament to look at it and fix it if it is that there is something that needs to be adapted or amended or adjusted here. So I'm not sure, I saw in your news report there, where it appears that, like Pontius Pilate, the Attorney General appeared, and I say this respectfully from what I saw, and I'm not making any conclusion, but from your news report, it seems that he basically is seeking to wash his hands of the matter and saying, well, it's a matter for the DPP and the police. I'm not entirely sure about that because it's the government that pilots this type of legislation. They're the ones who put it in force. And the same way, they were the ones who had to go and make the amendment in relation to the bars and the opening hours. Then I think ultimately they will be the ones who would have the responsibility to adjust this if there's need for some tweaking or fixing.
Martin, interestingly, you mentioned the DPP. Now, this incident took place over the weekend, over the festive weekend. We're moving into Thursday, so many days after. The fact that the DPP, they have not, well, at least for now, stepped forward and said, well, listen, this is the case. We are going to charge boat owner or patrons for XYZ. Does that in itself indicate that they're scrambling, they're trying to find something, they're searching for a charge? There's nothing to charge, really?
Well, it may just be that they're exercising a bit of caution in the circumstances, because when one looks at the regulations, and it's always good to be guided by the law. Section 41B of the Public Health Regulation says it is an offense to operate a party boat, boat tour, or nightclub. Now, clearly, it was not a nightclub. Clearly, it was not a boat tour because the boat was anchored at harbor. It was not, out on this open seas. So the question then becomes, what is a party boat? So, I mean, if it is that, okay, your normal user is for hosting parties and that sort of thing, then of course, yes, you may be classified as a party boat. But if it is that you have done a change of user and you have validly applied for and obtained a license to operate as a restaurant in circumstances where you are saying, look, I am parked up at harbor, I am anchored, I'm tied up at the dock, and I am running this as a safe zone, as a restaurant, then you may be able to argue a case to say that, look, I fall within Section 8.1 of the Public Health Regulations, which lists the following businesses as being eligible to operate as safe zones. Restaurants, that's the first thing that's there. So, it's quite an interesting scenario. And I can understand that the DPP's office would want to proceed with caution. And certainly, even in terms of the patrons, I would think it very difficult to make a case to say that the patrons can be found, guilty in the circumstances. I think it's going to be very, very difficult, because if it is that they legitimately came there for the purposes of a restaurant event, then, you ask yourself, how do you then make them liable?
Yeah, because the concept, yeah, Martin, sure. We have all been to a brunch. I guess the concept of a brunch is you step in, some hors d'oeuvres, some cutters, you have some sips, I would imagine conversation, probably a shake a leg. But again, I'm trying to figure out here, what's the difference between I guess it's probably the classification because, yes, quote unquote, it's a party boat because what we are seeing here or what happened over the weekend, it's been going on at various indoor events establishments for the entire season with parang and celebration and people in abundance winding down low, Martin. That's been going on for since the start of December.
Right, but the fact of the matter is this now, if it's a public event and an event where the public has entry to, then of course you come within the public health regulations. So the real issue here, Jason, would be the definition of party boat. So in other words, was this being operated as a party boat? And I'll tell you, it's not as simple as it may seem because, okay, if you, for instance, okay, if you have a restaurant in a building on land, okay, and you are operating it as a safe zone, so you comply with all the regulations, and you have some nice music playing, and a couple patrons get up and start to dance. Could someone say you're trying to operate a dance hall or a nightclub and you're in breach of the regulations? How you as the owner could be responsible for that? But it may be that it comes down to the factual matrix of what actually transpired. If it is that it is shown that this was just a ruse or a subterfuge for actually running it as a party boat under the guise or the masquerade of a restaurant, then of course, I guess the DPP may find a way to say, well, look, yes, you knew exactly what you were doing, and maybe even the patrons, if it is that they all had it planned as a party event, as opposed to a bona fide restaurant event, then of course the DPP may then find a way to say, well, look, yes, they're laying charges, but it's something you have to be very careful of, and you have to make sure you have the evidence, because this is the type of thing that could blow up in your face very badly if it is that you proceed with haste as opposed to caution.
And I would imagine other pleasure craft vessel owners will be looking on at this case to see what transpires, because I guess as simple or as frivolous as this might sound, I guess the whole concept of a party boat, whether the boat is moving, whether it's docked at the harbor, does it become a party boat officially if the boat sets sail and people start to dance, or is it a party boat whether it's just, as I said, docked, going nowhere? Because from what we understand, they had no captain, they had no crew, the engine wasn't even in the boat, apparently the boat just there sat down, the boat just there floating.
Right, and you see, and that's the thing. Now, I mean, a clear-cut example would be if it is that you have clear evidence that everybody is on the boat and they're balancing all over the place. Then you can't say that you are in a restaurant event.
You're slipping that balance smooth, there, Martin. You slip it in.
It is to balance.
Yes.
To know that you can't say that that's a brunch.
Yeah. That's a boat ride. Oh my goodness, Martin.
The evidence that the DPP has, and it's something that I would appreciate them proceeding with the greatest of caution rather than haste in the matter, because we've seen before, for instance, when the persons were arrested up at the housing chancellor and Lady Chancellor, then you saw eventually quite a few of the charges were dropped or dismissed. So I mean, you don't want to look foolish and end up with egg on your face as the DPP. You want to make sure that if you do proceed, you do actually have a clear-cut case and the evidence that makes it a reasonable case to charge people.
Martin, as always, thanks for the counsel, thanks for the candor. All the best to you and the family. I look forward to conversations with you next year.
Indeed, and the very best to you and the team at CNC3 and to Trinidad and Tobago in general. Thank you.
All the best. We come back and we dive into the discussion concerning the, of course, announcement with the flour and the price raise and what's going to transpire next year with the groceries. The president of the Supermarket Association, Dipti, he joins us next. Stick around.